Hello, everybody, and welcome into this week's edition of Know Thy Enemy, presented as always by the Right Way Sports Network. I'm your host, Evan McPhillips, and I continue to break down the upcoming opponent for the Bengals. And this week, we'll be taking a closer look at the Philadelphia Eagles. They've gone through, like many other teams we've talked about, quite a few changes from the team that was in the public eye a lot as they made their Super Bowl runs, and even a bit different from the team that went 10-1 at the start of the season last year before they suffered a 1-6 late season collapse. We're going to examine offensive line, weapons, kind of how things have shifted a little bit for their offense and their focus. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the defensive line and how things have changed there and kind of what the total of the unit looks. And then when we get all that out of the way, then we'll go ahead and we'll talk about the Bengals' keys to victory and how they can find success on offense and defense versus this talented Philadelphia Eagles team. So without further ado, we'll go ahead. We'll jump right in. I already mentioned the Philadelphia Eagles, obviously a very, very talented team in 2022, and then last season started off 10-1. They've definitely made a bit of a shift in their offensive identity, not only this season, but even in the last couple weeks, where we saw them in the first couple weeks before their early season bye, having a pass rate on early downs of upwards of 50%. Whereas post bye in the last 2 weeks, that has dropped down closer to 30% as they leaned a lot more on their offensive line, their running game, and Saquon Barkley in recent weeks and have found much success in that regard. The defense has been mixing it up. They played a lot of man a couple weeks ago, and then they've gone zone heavy the last few weeks with Wade Phillips and his cover four style, trusting those corners and Darius Slay and Quinyon Mitchell, who's been really impressive to kind of man the outsides and kind of isolate sometimes, really trusting them in that regard, allowing them to get pressure on opposing quarterbacks and really kind of have the bend but don't break mentality on defense. And we see that when we look at their overall numbers, where they're 16th in EPA per play on defense, but they are 7th in success rate allowed. So even though they may occasionally give up the bigger plays and the points, largely on a down basis, they're 11th in drop back success rate, they're 10th in rushing success rate. So it's fair to call them a top 10 unit this season, though much like the Bengals defense, it is fair to question whether the success in recent weeks has been due to lack of competition, as they have also played and beat the Giants and the Browns, as the Bengals did. I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens when the two teams clash this week to really get an answer to that question. The Eagles' offense, too, has obviously, we talked about, shifted their identity, but on the whole for the season, they're 11th in EPA per play, they're 10th in success rate, and 6th in EPA per rush, yet 13th in EPA per dropback. So very successful as a rushing offense, especially in the last few weeks. Jaylen Herz, he's been very polarizing this year, and he has not been the absolute stud, top five looking quarterback that he was in 2022. He is first in completion percentage over expectation right now. And I feel like that is not because he is throwing and incredible touch passes with precision accuracy in between defenders and completing improbable passes. I think a lot of it has to do with the nature of their jump ball kind of offense on some certainties where they try to isolate A.J. Brown and then pepper him with targets. To his credit, he's caught 5 of his 6 contested catch opportunities, especially good ones like in the Browns game there to seal the end of the game. So credit to him for delivering in that sense. It can be a little bit like when you have really good success on third down in the game and maybe you go 11 for 12 and you know you're not going to go 11 for 12 on third down next week, but you are happy to have it that week, right? I see that a lot in Jaylen Hertz, where can you expect a lot of these contested balls and, third down plays to be consistently converted? No. And they even struggled in third down last week a lot as well, even against the Giants, despite their success in the overall score of the game. But I do think that projecting forward, I think it's fair to question whether that success is going to be able to be withheld. And part of that reason is you look at the other numbers that relate to his quarterback play and kind of qualify things. And he definitely hasn't been a top 5 or top 10 quarterback when you look at a lot of different metrics. And we'll dive into those a little bit here. He's 10th in dropback success rate this season and 11th in passer rating, which are solid numbers. 15th in EPA per play overall. when you add the context of PFF grades into them, he becomes 22nd in PFF grade out of 28 quarterbacks. And when you isolate to just the passing grade, they gave him a 20. He ranks 25th out of 28 quarterbacks. Now, obviously, if you don't care for PFF grades, you feel like there's too much context and opinion in those. Okay, that's fine. I might disagree, but I understand and I hear that. I do think that anyone who's watched Jalen Hurts has seen that they've transitioned towards more of a limited offense in recent weeks, relying more on the run game and asking Jalen just to not turn the ball over, be precise. And I think you've seen it a little bit in how he's been careful and maybe not as aggressive in some spots as you maybe like him to be. And also, to his credit, he does have 6 big time throws this season in the games that they have played. However, despite only having 4 interceptions on the season, he does have 11 turnover worthy plays, which puts him as first among quarterbacks in turnover worthy play percentage. So, despite not having the high interception total necessarily, he still has been putting the ball in harm's way at a rate higher than any other quarterback. So I do believe that the Bengals will have opportunities to take advantage of those turnover worthy plays. If they can seize them, I think that can be a big difference maker in this game. I also wanted to point out that Jalen Hurts has not been as comfortable in the pocket this season, especially when it comes to setting protections. Pocket presence has never been a strength for him. Um, Big Al, right here, Roll Tide, Alabama fan here. Love Jalen Hurts, love him as a person, love what he's persevered through as a player, and how he has improved his game to get to the NFL level where he is now. With that being said, I've always felt that he was more of an athlete who plays quarterback than a quarterback who is an athlete. And what I mean by that is he's always been good at the tangibles, right? The arm strength, the arm talent, the velocity that he can put on passes, the ability to extend plays, to be a threat as a rusher. These have all been good things, and he has also improved a lot since college in terms of being able to read the entirety of the field and process things that way. However, I would also say he is limited in how he feels the pocket and his security in there. I think there are limitations to his consistency when it comes to being a accurate thrower in terms of pace, touch, and those sort of things, and kind of layering throws. With that in mind, 3 of his 4 interceptions have been between the numbers and beyond 10 plus yards. We will circle back around on that. Just wanted to make note of that. We will be talking about that in the Bengals' keys to victory. Spent a lot of time talking about the quarterback, and rightly so, but another man who is extremely deserving of praise is AJ Brown. When he's been healthy this season, he's easily playing like a top 3, top 5 wide receiver, and I don't see any argument against that. He's second in PFF receiving grade, first in yards per route run with 3.78, which is fucking bonkers. That every time you run a route, you're averaging 3.78 yards for your team. That's incredible, man. Even being that successful with a 14.9 average depth of target, getting a lot of downfield work. Like I said before, caught 5 of his 6 contested catch opportunities. He's 7th in passer rating when targeted. Just an absolute stud of a receiver. Threat downfield, threat after the catch, threat on slants, just big, strong. Not a guy you want to be tackling all the time. Bengals are definitely going to have their hands full with him. Talked about being an Alabama fan, obviously. Big fan of Devontae Smith and what he can bring. He's always really shown when AJ Brown has gone down. And this year, he's maybe not the raw production numbers aren't maybe where you would expect them to be with Devontae Smith's talent. 30-second dirty work, while AJ Brown can do a lot of the underneath kind of gadget plays that are drawn up for him. Either isolated to give him a lot more space to work with and take advantage of, or just the downfield targets in general. I think Devontae Smith has been very consistent for them, especially in the short to intermediate areas and a little bit of the downfield kind of area as well. He's definitely a very good weapon, and I think the Bengals are definitely going to want to play this team a lot like teams have been playing them, where you have to account for Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and you might want to try and have 2 high safeties, though that is going to leave you disadvantaged when you go to try and stop a guy like Saquon Barkley, which, speaking of him, he's having quite the career year on a brand new team. After coming to the Eagles, he now is ranking 3rd in terms of yards per attempt. He's got 5 touchdowns on the season, and he's 6th in yards after contact per attempt as well. He's top 5 in runs of both 10 and 15 plus yards, and he's third in terms of breakaway percentage, which are the percentage of runs that go for 15 or more yards by a running back this season. He's been a very talented receiver throughout his career, but we just haven't seen him utilized like that for the Eagles. He's 22nd of 28 running backs in yards per route run and averaging just over 2 catches for 17 yards a game. But I do think that may be more of a game plan and game script specific thing as opposed to just kind of avoiding involving him in the offense because he is such a talented receiver when he has the ball in his hands in space. Um, God, RIP Jordan Mailata. Just want to say, get better soon, man. Hope you have a speedy recovery. Was one of the best tackles in the NFL. Fred Johnson will be filling in for his shoes. Did so admirably. Bengals fans will be very familiar with Fred Johnson and will probably be very excited at the prospect of Trey Hendrickson going up against him for most of the game. I do want to shout out a guy who has just continued to do it at a high level year in, year out. Lane Johnson, sixth in pass block grade this season among tackles, first in pass block efficiency, which is just pressures and sacks on a per snap basis that you've allowed. First in pass block efficiency on true pass sets, which is, hey, you are 3rd and 7, 3rd and 5, no play action, no wide receiver screens. The defense is coming for you. How good are you? And he's been the best tackle in those situations. He's also 13th out of the qualifying tackles in run block grade as well. Excuse me. So Lane Johnson just really continues to do it, man. One of the steady stalwart tackles year over year in the NFL. As a Bengals fan, very jealous, very jealous. The interior of the offensive line has not been as stout. Obviously, we talked about Jason Kelsey retiring. We have Landon Dickerson, who is very talented. Mekhi Becton, who has been much maligned in his NFL career for having some injuries and inconsistent play, but has all the physical tools in the world that you'd want. And Cam Jurgens is now filling in on the interior for said retired Jason Kelsey. All of these guys have above average PFF grades, and all of them are grading out well as run blockers. But Cam Jurgens and Mekhi Becton have pass blocking grades of 54.8 and 51.6, respectively, this season. So much like we talked about with the Giants, with the Browns, guys like Sheldon Rankins and BJ Hill, who shout out to BJ Hill, has been playing with his hair on fire the last couple weeks. Those guys are going to have an ability to attack and really try and penetrate the inside, make Jaylen Herz uncomfortable, and flush him from the pocket. Landon Dickerson, obviously, still one of the better guards in the NFL. Still a very talented guy. Has not quite had the production that we might have been used to in the last couple of years, but that can kind of happen when there's a bit of a drop off in talent by the guys playing around you, communication and continuity, etc. So I don't want to knock him too much for that in that sense. Flipping over to the defense, obviously, a lot of talented guys still on offense, but the defense has really been a consistent factor, I think, and a driving factor in keeping the Eagles in a lot of these games. And yes, the Giants game makes things look a little bit better, but I do want to give credit where credit's due because as the faces have changed for the Eagles, they have still found a way to be consistently aggressive and sound on defense in some really surprising ways. I wanted to shout out Cooper DeJean. Played sparingly this season, only 102 snaps, but in his 63 coverage snaps, he does have an 86.8 coverage grade. So when he's on the field, he's been excellent. Quinyon Mitchell and Darius Slay. Props to you guys, man, because like I talked about before, the Eagles can play a lot of man. They also can do a lot of the cover 4 and the quarters look stuff, and that can leave your boundary corners isolated on some very talented receivers and basically turn into a sort of pseudo man. That's really, really tough assignments. And that's really, really tough assignments for a young guy like Quinyon Mitchell, right? Maybe not as much for a guy who's a veteran in Darius Slay, but still, and a veteran who maybe is losing a little bit of the physical traits, he's still found ways to be very productive. Despite being 28th out of 80 in PFF coverage grade, Quinyon Mitchell is. I don't Again, the difficulty of the assignment is not necessarily accounted for in PFF grades. And I feel like that should definitely bump Quinyon Mitchell and Darius Slay up a bit. Darius Slay coming in at 20th in coverage grade among 80 cornerbacks. However, when you look at the ball production, That absolutely has been there in spades, and that's what makes this cornerback room so dastardly and so deadly. When you have Quinyon Mitchell, who has 6 pass breakups, which is tied 6th among defensive backs this season, and a forced incompletion rate of 26%, which is tied for 3rd best among corners this season. Darius Slay is also on much of the same path where he has a 19% forced incompletion rate. Still very, very good. 1 in 5 targets coming his way ended up being incomplete or intercepted. And then he's tied for 12th among 80 corners with 4 pass breakups. So both of them being challenged, asked to carry tough assignments for corners, especially in the NFL where it's so unforgiving for corners to be so consistent all the time. And they've been doing a good job of getting that ball production too and shutting them down that way. So props to them for doing that in a very difficult defense. Josh Sweat has been the anchor. Many Bengals fans may be looking and going, "Where's Brandon Graham? Where's Derek Barnett? Where is Fletcher Cox? Where are these guys who have been giving everybody hell for the past couple of years, right? Or from the last time that the Bengals played the Philadelphia Eagles, and I believe it was Joe Burry's rookie year." Um, the defensive line has absolutely had a lot of shuffling. On the edge, you have Josh Sweat as kind of the main edge threat. To his credit, great as a pass rusher this season, 10th in pass rush win percentage, 14th in pass rush productivity, which is how many pressures and sacks you get on a per snap basis with a weight towards sacks, because obviously sacks are more valuable than pressures, but efficiency numbers are very valuable to us. They take the subjective matter out of a lot of things, right? Um, you've also got 23 pressures, 3 sacks for Josh Sweat on the season. When you look at the new addition, Bryce Huff, some disappointment there in terms of production this season so far. He is 44th out of 74 edge defenders in pass rush win rate, and he's 60th in pass rush productivity. So just not winning a lot of his battles individually, and then also when he does win, just not finding ways to produce on a pressure rate on a sack basis. So that's been a disappointing signing for them. I don't know that that will persist. I feel like Bryce Huff is a talented player, but he's definitely still trying to find his footing in the Eagles defense. Someone who has been terrorizing the interior of the defensive line in the stead of Fletcher Cox is Jalen Carter, who many will remember is a very talented player coming out of college. One of those instances where, gosh, how the heck did he fall to the Eagles, right? As an interior defender, he ranks 10th in pass rush productivity, 13th in pass rush win rate, and more impressively, as an interior defender, he ranks 5th among interior defenders in PFF pass rush grade on those true pass sets. So again, taking away the play action boots, the throws that come out in under 2 seconds, the wide receiver screens, when you pin your ear back and go get the quarterback. And the Bengals run a lot of these true pass sets, a lot more of these true dropbacks. That's because they are one of the more pass heavy offenses in the NFL. There's going to be opportunities for guys like Jalen Carter to be very, very disruptive. So you definitely want to be as aware of him as you were of Dexter Lawrence when you were playing the Giants. Nolan Smith and Brandon Graham are some situational and rotational pass rusher, edge linebacker hybrids. Both still solid quality guys, even though they may only play 80, 100 snaps, in the last couple weeks. They do come in on the pass rush downs, and they both have pass rush win rates over 10%. So some good solid depth there. Stop me if you've heard that one before about the Eagles defensive line. The linebackers have been changing, and Nakobe Dean and Zach Bond have been their new mainstays in that spot. And there's been a lot of mixed results in that capacity where Zach Bond has performed pretty admirably. He's about middle of the pack in PFF grade, 40th out of 52 linebackers in run defense grade, but he's been very good as a coverage defender, ranking 9th in coverage grade, and he is 8th of 52 linebackers in defensive stops. So he has been very productive in terms of coverage and handling very tough assignments in that sense, and what we ask linebackers to do in the modern NFL, covering flats, covering seams, covering all these crazy different slot receiver hybrids that you end up dealing with these days. So props to him for being a very, very quality linebacker in coverage with some very tough assignments in the NFL these days. Nakobe Dean has not shared that success. He is 48th out of those 52 linebackers in PFF grade, 49th in coverage grade, and about closer to middle of the pack with 36th in run defense grade. He is, however, 15th out of those 52 linebackers in defensive stops. So lacking the down to down consistency, but Phil still finding ways to create enough splash plays to have an impact on this Philadelphia Eagles defense. Lastly, we'll talk about the safeties manning the back end of the defense for the Eagles. Everybody remembers Chauncey Gardner Johnson. Many Bengals fans have talked about him in free agency in prior years. He's had a rough year in terms, especially of run defense. And there he is 66th out of 67 safeties in run defense grade. And that is largely because he also ranks 66th in missed tackle rate. So very aggressive, not very fundamental when in his tackling form and technique, I guess you would say. He has, however, been much better in coverage, ranking 32 out of 67. And I always take coverage grades with a safety with a grain of salt because there are so few instances where safeties are directly targeted in coverage. So that's always an important thing to consider when, considering these PFF grades when it comes to coverage for these defensive backs who have low target sample sizes. Speaking of coverage and safeties, Reed Blankenship has been a top 10 safety for the Eagles in coverage grade. He's also top 10 in PFF grade, and he's been a little bit more lackluster in the run defense grade department, largely due to his 49th missed tackle rate. That's 49 out of 67 corners. So the safeties have been much better in coverage than they have against the run in general. Reed Blankenship has been much more of their successful and productive coverage safety, while Chauncey Gardner Johnson is back there just kind of wreaking havoc and flying around the field, creating havoc for other opposing offenses as well. So lots of different players on the Philadelphia Eagles, very talented unit top to bottom that has guys at every level that have found ways to produce in unique ways and be very effective in their overall defensive scheme. I do want to talk about now the keys to victory for the Bengals. We've thrown a lot of information at you, but Evan, what does it all mean? We'll talk about it right here. So, first things first, I think you're going to have to attack the outside with Jamar and T a lot. We've seen that a lot in the last couple weeks as teams try and bracket Jamar, put a lot of above and underneath coverage on him at the same time and take him away. If they are going to be running man, if they're going to be running cover four and isolating their outside corners on Jamar and on T, you're going to have a lot of one-on-one situations where you can do your back shoulder balls, where you can do those out routes. I think you're going to have to be comfortable surviving there, and I think the Bengals absolutely are. I think that plays to their strength. So whether they're running man, whether they're running that cover four zone that Wade Phillips has become very, very prevalent and very well renowned for, I definitely think that you have the horses in terms of Jamar and T to be able to attack the outside and make that happen. With that being said, a thing that was an issue in the Browns game is they played a lot of man defense all throughout the year. And the Bengals seemed like they expected a game plan with a lot of man defense. And when it was zone more often than they expected, and especially in key downs, excuse me, it didn't seem like they had a plan or they were ready for it. And they didn't necessarily pivot to an alternative until the second half. You got to have a plan to beat man or zone. I talked about how the Eagles were heavy on man early in the season, have been a lot more of the zone the last couple weeks. Whatever they come out with, and I think it might be zone after how the Bengals struggled on offense against the Browns. I think you need to be ready. You can't take 2 quarters to adjust. The Eagles are a very talented team, and you cannot take 2 quarters off and just spot them points. That's not going to be a successful game plan. That is decidedly not a key to victory. You also need to just have the cover four beaters. Be ready for that. Post digs, dagger concepts. Just have those ready because Joe Burrow is so great at pre and post snap identifying coverages. And I think that you can trust him to do that and just kind of have that play in your back pocket for when you see the look so that he can call an audible, pull the trigger, and you end up catching them with a beater on one of those plays where you feel pretty confident that they're running one of those cover four looks. You also need to attack Nakobe Dean. Like I talked about, Zach Bond has been one of the best coverage linebackers in the NFL so far this season. Nakobe Dean has been the exact opposite. So I would definitely lean towards attacking him with the tight ends, with the in routes and the dig routes that you might have coming over the middle, especially with T. Higgins. I think that's definitely going to be an area of the field that the Bengals can attack and try to find ways to some easy yardage. On defense, you need to load the box. You need to encourage the Eagles to throw. Jalen Hurts has 3 games with under 200 passing yards. In 2 of their losses, I believe he had under 200 passing yards as well. It's definitely it's hard to win in the NFL if your quarterback is not going to throw for at least 200 yards. Your running back has to absolutely go off. I think that you can do things like we talked about, middle of the field open, where Jalen Hurts has thrown 3 of his 4 picks this season, past 10 yards. Okay, let's load up in front of the sticks and at the sticks, right? Let's go ahead. Let's show blitz. Let's show simulated pressures. Maybe we bail out, but we want to load the box to make them feel uncomfortable that they're either going to be running into a blitz, whether they're going to be running into a loaded box. Make them check out of it. Make Jalen Hurts throw the ball more, make him be the one to beat you, and increase the opportunities you have to get some of those turnover worthy plays that he's been blessing other teams with. I think you need to do the sim pressures and the blitz looks too, because I think you need to put the responsibility on Jalen Hurts to try and set the protections, especially when you have new left tackle coming in and Fred Johnson and kind of picking things up there. The communication might not be great with everyone. So you do want to stress that with some stunts and twists and different opportunities like that. You do want to put the sim pressures and make Jalen Hurts be thinking entirely about where is the pressure actually coming from. And if he's thinking about that and he's slowing down his process, he's going to be in the pocket and he's probably going to be uncomfortable because he's not one of those quarterbacks who's very comfortable climbing up into the pocket and just kind of maneuvering. He will bail. He will sometimes, even like Joe Burrow does sometimes. This is something everyone does where you can pull your eyes down if you feel the pressure. If you can get to him early and start making him feel that pressure, I think you can pull his eyes down and slow down his process a little bit, which would be very advantageous. Um, like I said, take advantage of the turnover worthy plays, overload against the run, and don't let Saquon beat you. Try and take away AJ Brown and do what they do with Jamar Chase. Over top and underneath on AJ Brown as much as possible. Load the box and make guys like Devontae Smith and maybe Dallas Goedert if he's able to play. Saw that he was DNP today with that hamstring injury. Make these other weapons beat you. Because if you can just limit the running of Jalen Hurts and Saquon and you make Hurts try and beat you as a passer, I think that's your best solution with the way that the offense for the Eagles is constructed right now and what their production has looked like and what you have seen from Jalen Hurts to this point. Seems like we're getting longer and longer on these every single week as I keep uncovering more interesting nuggets as we have more data to kind of fall back on. I appreciate you guys tuning in, watching the whole thing. Please, as always, give this video a like, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Helps us to continue to bring you guys awesome content much like this. Don't forget to tune in on our show Wednesdays for State of the Jungle at 7 p.m. We'll always be talking about the previous game and also previewing the upcoming game as well and giving our thoughts and answering your questions. We'd love to have you guys join us. So as always, thank you. I appreciate you all. Hoo day. We'll see you next week.